Educating HG, Part 9. You may recall that I had resolved to seduce each of my university girlfriend's housemates. A man should have aims, and since she was in the sustained devaluation, that meant that there was no shackle on me engaging in such activity. She had 5 housemates, 5 targets that I would own and possess. I already knew them, of course. They were non-intimate secondary sources in my fuel matrix. Not that I thought of them as such at that time, but it was now time to move each of them up a level and make them intimate partner secondary sources. The question would be just how intimate I would become with them. I decided that a structured approach would serve me best, rather than waiting for simple opportunity to make an appropriate move on whoever might be available. I would make things happen. I hate waiting. Waiting is a waste of one's time and resources. Accordingly, I decided I would pick them off one by one, and I would start with Joanne. Joanne was actually American. She was born in the United States. I forget where, as her father was from the United States, although her mother was British. I remember that her father was called Dennis, because she explained that as a child she thought all of the fire engines belonged to her father, as they had Dennis on the front of the vehicles. Well, Joanne was blonde. She was physically attractive, long blonde hair, which was slightly curled, blue eyes, and a trim figure. An inviting backside made for spanking, and pert breasts. Naturally, youth remained on her side, thus everything was where it should be. She was around 5'6" in height and often wore tight-fitting jeans. She was studying economics. She put me in mind of Claudia Schiffer in terms of looks, although she was a little more horsey around the mouth than Schiffer. But the overall effect was still pleasing to the eye. What proved most appealing about Joanne, however, was the fact that she was attractive, both in terms of physical looks and demeanour, and she gathered significant attention from male students. But she never had a boyfriend. Repeatedly, her housemates would suggest suitable propositions to her, but she always dismissed them. I would listen as they would debate certain individuals, pretending not to pay attention as I watched television, but making careful note of her protestations and reasons for rejection. What was clear to me was that she wanted to be regarded as special. Not in a self-absorbed fashion, but rather she evidently regarded herself as not special, and for that reason craved to be treated as special by somebody. Although she had been born in the United States, her parents divorced when she was a young child, and her mother took her back to Britain. Hence, she spoke with a southeastern accent, no hint of the United States evident about her. It was clear she adored her father, but had grown up with a geographically distant relationship with him, which was what evidently lay behind her mistrust of men as a whole, and a desire to be treated as special. I had always got along perfectly well with Joanne. I made her laugh and took an interest in her. She regarded that as friendship, whereas I was naturally using her as the appliance that she and everybody else is. I would occasionally catch her watching me as I interacted with my girlfriend. I could see her regarding me out of the corner of my eye, and then I would turn my head to meet her gaze. She would quickly look away and blush. Her reaction fueled me, and also told me that there was something more than friendship that she desired. From time to time, she would be a little high-handed with my girlfriend, something my girlfriend would confide in me about. "Oh, I suspect she can't help feeling somewhat envious of you and the other ladies who have boyfriends," I would explain. "Well, she could easily get one herself," my girlfriend would respond. "She's scared to do so," I continued. "Scared?" "Yes. She wants it to be perfect. She's a child of divorce. She doesn't trust relationships, and therefore it has to be perfect, otherwise she will not even try. She would rather miss out than risk getting it wrong." Do you think so?" "Oh, yes. That's why she gets a little shirty with you. She wants what you have. She wants you." "Naturally she does, but I knew better than to suggest that to my girlfriend. I did not want her watching my interactions with Joanne and getting in the way of my plan." "No, not me specifically. She wants the relationship that we have." "What is that?" asked my girlfriend. "Special." I smiled and kissed her before hugging her to me as I looked over her shoulder and smiled at myself in the mirror. She held tight onto me. Not a sensation I particularly enjoyed, but the urgency by which she gripped me signalled just how much she remained under my control, even though I found her increasingly irritating. Thus, over the coming weeks, I encroached on the world of Joanne. I would meet her gaze across the room and smile. She would always return the smile and then look down in a bashful manner. When I passed her, say in the kitchen for example, I would place a hand on the small of her back as I moved by her. It was a gentle touch and appeared innocent, but it prompted her to twist her head to look at me and react with a warm smile. I would sit and talk with her, listening to her concerns about her coursework. The subject matter was deadly dull, but I would occupy myself picturing me undressing her and having her, wondering what shape her nipples were, what the curvature of her backside would look like as she rode me. It certainly proved a much more enjoyable set of images than the relevant economic principle that she was describing. None of this interaction was done in an excessive manner. It would appear to an onlooker that we were simply friendly, which was to be expected after all. I would regularly be at the house, and it is always preferable for your boyfriend to get along with your friends, yes? Yet I was steadily connecting Joanne to me, my tendrils wrapping around her, creating link after link after link. It was an autumn afternoon when my girlfriend had departed to the university one afternoon for a couple of lectures. I had undertaken mine in the morning and already completed the reading that I needed to do when I called around at the house to see my girlfriend. Well, I made it seem that was the case, but my aim was to see Joanne. With my girlfriend gone, I waited in her bedroom to ensure she did not return and then made my way onto the landing. There was a second steep staircase which led to two bedrooms at the top of the house, one adopted by the Gothic Nicola and the other by my target, Joanne. I knew Nicola was out. There was only one other person in the house, Veronica, whose room was on the ground floor. She was a bookworm and would have her head stuck in her anatomy books. The likelihood of being disturbed was very low indeed. I reached the top of the stairs and decided that I would place the ironing board, which was propped up against the wall outside of the two doors, across the top of the stairs, so that on the off chance that Veronica did come to see Joanne, she would have to move it out of the way, which would make a noise and allow me to take appropriate action. With the ironing board in position, I approached Joanne's door and knocked. "Come in," she said from inside her bedroom. I pushed the door open and walked in. "Oh, hi, H.G. I hadn't realized you were still here," she said, smiling. She was lying on her bed, reading a novel, but rose to greet me as I entered the room, closing the door behind me, cutting off the world from the two of us. I asked her about the book she was reading and feigned interest in her responses. After a short while, I walked to the window. Her room was at the rear of the house, up in the roof space, and afforded an excellent view across the spires and towers of the city. The trees dotted the cityscape. The leaves russet gold and brown, as Joanne came and stood next to me. She placed her hands on the high windowsill, and I mirrored her, allowing my right hand just to touch her left hand. She did not move it. "Such a special view," I remarked. "It is. Sometimes I just like to stand here and look out over the city, wondering what goes on under the different roofs." "Oh, all manner of clandestine deeds, I should imagine, in this city," I smiled, and she gave a gentle laugh. "You know," I continued, as I took her hand in mine. She accepted me doing so. There was no resistance. "It is a view which will live long in your memory." I turned to face her and maintained my steady, unblinking gaze upon her. She looked back at me. I saw uncertainty, but also excitement flicker across her face. She pushed at her hair with a free hand, making no attempt to break away from my hand hold. "Why is that, then?" she asked. "Why do you think?" I replied, continuing to look at her. I knew what she wanted. I knew that by my sheer presence her feelings would be a maelstrom, a reaction to the tour de force that stood beside her, towering over her. I'm not sure," she said. "You know," I repeated. "I regard you as special," I remarked, still staring at her. She smiled self-consciously and looked away, and then straight back at me as if to check I had meant it. "Really? Why?" she asked. I took her other hand, and she accepted it. "Words are very unnecessary," I added. I knew she would get the reference. She liked them too. She nodded, and I knew then that was the green light. I moved forward and slipped my arm around her back, pulling her to me. She tilted her head as I placed my mouth on hers and kissed her. She immediately put her arms around me as I kissed her, our mouths moving together, my left hand pulling her T-shirt from out of her jeans, and my hand slipping underneath, so my fingers could slide up and down her back. The first murmur of delight slipped from her mouth as we stood kissing at the window. I continued, my tongue slipping into her mouth and meeting her own. I pulled her tighter to me as my right hand went to the back of her neck. I then lifted my mouth from her, and she looked at me as if slightly disorientated. I said nothing, intentionally so. I paused, and then she moved her mouth forward, wanting more, wanting to feel my full lips pressed against her own, her hands rubbing up and down on my broad back as we resumed kissing. And so it happened in that small room atop the house on a crisp autumnal day. First one down.